Thank you to both of you, and thanks to everyone coming out. It's been a huge goal of all of us to bring people, young creative people together, artists of Miami, so really appreciate everyone showing up today and being part of this community. And we're all classically trained architects, but we really dislike a lot of the architecture that's happening here in Miami and Florida in general, and so we are trying to do something very different with our practice and change the way that we see what can be built, how we live, and how we inhabit Miami. So first and foremost, we always think about this slide in our projects. We see ourselves as archaeologists more than architects. There's this kind of image of the kind of inflated ego architect, the person that is creating everything, and we're actually much more interested in basically looking at the conditions of a place, understanding what's special about them, and presenting or representing them in a unique way. And you're going to see a number of projects here where that's exactly the strategy. Sometimes we have a project where the site is really difficult, like we're in a suburban situation where you have neighbors on both sides, and we have to kind of create our own environment, and Andrew's going to talk to that as well. And so we are always in flux. There's about 8 of us. Lauren Elia is here, also Jessica Martin and Mapio Mercea are also here, in addition to Mari, Andrew, and myself. And so when we're working, I think the main thing that we respect about Miami is that the environment and the ecosystem here is very active in creating where we live. And so we are intent on entering into a partnership with that situation. And let's see, so we are very interested in basically going out into nature, understanding it, studying all these different ecosystems here, understanding where we live. And so this is a drawing by Chris Cuesta, who's here, Studio Cuesta, incredible landscape designer and art partner in the nursery we'll talk about. And this drawing basically shows how in Florida, if you change elevation by 1 or 2 feet, if there is a slight area of more water, if there's an area prone to wildfire, that's going to completely change what that site becomes, what grows there, what's going to be living there. And so this creates a really interesting opportunity when we're making projects on sites which seem empty or seem to have no specific character, because the ecology is going to be really dependent on the geology, the elevation, the drainage of the soil, the amount of sunlight. And so each one of these different ecologies is going to produce a very different condition, a very different set of color, very different amount of light, heat, etc. And so this is going to be kind of showing a few different of these examples of different ecosystems, different environments around Florida that we're always trying to explore and understand better to allow to form our projects. So you're going to see some of these environments called back to on certain projects. And I just kind of wanted to mention we're here at the Campon, which is an incredible laboratory from David Fairchild. And we're very interested to create our own space where we can have creative people gather, where we can develop an understanding of the nature here in Miami. And so we're going to go into what it means to create this space. And if you haven't been to his office, you can just understand from these pictures the depth of research that he was doing here and the kind of all-immersive experience of Miami and tropical plants in general that he was creating. And we're very interested in producing something like that for the contemporary Miami citizen and for our practice. And there's other great examples around the world. This is Roberto Burle Marx's sitio in Rio, where he was basically going out into the Amazon. And before native plants were popular, he was bringing them from the Amazon and planting them in his garden, where he would bring people and friends and have parties. And this is Monet's garden, of course, which was the canvas for all of his water lily paintings. He famously said that my garden is my best work of art. And Cesar Manrique in Spain, and there's many examples. And so this is what is kind of coming out of the ground in the Redlands and what will be the center for Tropica and for Studio Cuesta. And so we have 7 acres, very close to the Everglades, and this was a completely empty site. And eventually, we're going to be trying to get to this point where we're going to have a plant nursery surrounding a center space where we're going to be working. We have, in the future, we're going to have basically a hardwood hammock of field-grown trees where we had moved soil to the edge of the property to create a growing medium. And then everything in the center in pots, plants in pots, and then greenhouse and the shade houses to basically go out, take seeds that otherwise are not being grown as much commercially here, and then eventually a space for working and being together. So this is kind of where we are today, and just kind of want to explain how we think about creating this kind of space and how it informs our work. So when we first got there, this is what we saw. It was basically a field of weeds. It was an old farm. I think it was potatoes or something like this. And to most people, this would look very empty and kind of, it was a bit intimidating actually to think about what to do here. We understand this used to be a pine rockland, so there is some history of some beautiful things happening, but during the years, this was basically being farmed. And so in the process of looking for a site, we wanted to understand the geology, and so we were testing the soil, and interestingly enough, this site had incredible oolite. It's all different around Miami, but this one had iron in it, so you get this kind of orange color. And we were doing these excavations to understand where's the water table. So this is actually just where the water is naturally under the ground, and it's basically flowing all under the Everglades into this property. And so this is showing the mounding up of the dirt. So we basically exposed this 7-acre platform of rock. And again, the intention here is to create a really good, rich growing medium. That's the Redlands, the very rich soil of South Florida, that kind of almost like reddish color to the dirt. So this will be growing trees. And we basically planted, I think it was almost 2,000 trees as soon as we possibly could. And so that was on day one, and now they're 10 feet tall. And there's many different species we're going to be growing here with the intention of developing more and more plants into the trade, but also into our projects, and to bring plants that you wouldn't otherwise see in gardens here in Miami, but are occurring in nature. So this is the very first cut in the ground that we did with an excavator, and it, of course, produced something very striking. And we began to remove more and more rock, and this was the process where, through almost like slicing bread, we were able to use these huge excavators, take the rock out of the ground in one huge piece, and the scale was just unbelievable. And these all came out, and so this was last summer, and basically organizing the rock around the property to understand what size of the rock we have. We had nothing designed at this point. We didn't know what we were doing. And once we started getting the rock out, we started to say, okay, maybe we kind of can take this in a direction to create some sense of an enclosure or protected space in the middle of the nursery where we can all gather. And so this is part of the process, numbering every rock, figuring out exactly where it's going to go in every hole. 3 machines being used to erect each rock, and eventually cleaning them off, pressure washing them to remove the dirt that was stuck in them. And so you can just see from this picture, but there's many other examples of the different organisms, fossils, et cetera, that have basically, this site used to be underwater. And so the crustaceans and the shells and all the fossils of these beings were falling to the ground and slowly layering. And so these rocks are this very elemental, almost core sample of history that is being taken out and put here. And so this is sort of as we go through the months, and eventually about 6 months ago we were there, and the light and the colors here are just incredible, and really this is going to be a place for everybody to come and be open. So please connect with us, and we'd love to share the space with you as it grows. And so this is getting closer to today where we started to populate with plants, and we don't really know we can't really think of exactly what a true Miami architecture is. We don't know exactly what that would look like. And And this is kind of revealing itself, what it truly means to just use the materials on the site, plants from the place. And eventually, we're bringing in this beam to add a little bit of stiffness, which will be used to tie into some eventual structures. And these are just some more shots of the nursery. We started playing around with flashlights to see eventually the lighting we'll have there. And yeah, some amazing moonrises that happen in this space. And so this was the original rendering, which we got pretty close to. I feel pretty happy with that. So that was great. And this is what we're building. Basically 3 cabins that will be behind the rocks. And what this does is that it gives this center garden, this courtyard, a true feeling of being a landscape. You're not going to feel a building here. It's going to be a secluded oasis garden with the water, with the rocks only. And the buildings will be kind of hidden behind the rocks, but looking into the garden. So this is where we're heading to, and we're pouring some concrete tomorrow. But that beam that is connecting all the rocks, supporting them, is going to act as a kind of a sunshade support, and you'll be able to pull ropes like a sail to create shade on this porch balcony here. And then the buildings are basically glass and wood. And so this is what the buildings will manifest as. And then inside, it's all as inexpensive wood as we can find. And you basically look across this garden, and you'll start to see some of the other cabins on the other side. So you have this kind of collective space to be in. And so these are the open spaces that will have all different kinds of functions. And when we talk about our work, we are very intent on being design builders. And so this is Andrew in the excavator, first time after watching one YouTube video. I have no idea how that's possible, but it was an incredible feat. And he just wants to do it. He's a builder at heart, and I think that's what being an architect. When I was in school, I was always drawing 2-dimensional drawings on a computer, and there's a big difference when you're out in the field actually doing the work. And so it was really rewarding to see him jump to that opportunity and just do it. I mean, he sent me this picture. I almost spit my coffee out. So yeah, I thought it was a joke or something. And you can see him on the hill there in the very background, like really excited about his day after setting these columns. And it's just an incredible experience to be out there with people that are so passionate about what they're doing. And we're all basically figuring out as we go. We think we have a great team of people that we know when something is the right or wrong decision. And other than that, we're just kind of going and seeing. So this is one of the greenhouses that's coming up out of the ground. We're very excited to start growing seeds. And so we're going to go into a few projects kind of quickly, and then I'll pass the mic off. So this is the tent house, and all of our projects, I think this is a really amazing quote. When you think of your garden, it's very important that all of our gardens have a limitation, but when your garden enters into a sensation of landscape, when you're part of the native plants around, when you are designing something which abstracts the nature we have here, it automatically produces a feeling that your garden extends into Miami and the space beyond, and you're part of something else. When you see the birds arrive and the butterflies coming, it's a different type of creation. So this was the existing conditions here, and there was some really beautiful oak trees, but there's mangoes and a lot of kind of rugolini, just kind of junk grass and nothing very interesting other than the oaks. And so really when we talk about archaeology in this sense, you have an amazing setting here. It just needs to be cleaned and exposed and let shine. So this is a great example here. These palms, I mean, some people think they're attractive, and they can be, but in this case, they're basically hiding all of the oak trees, and it's just changing the experience here. So in this particular garden, this is essentially a hardwood hammock if we squint at it. And so this is the result of bringing in a lot of green, a lot of native plants, a lot of cleaning of the oak trees, and letting the space be what it wants to be. In that garden, we created a pool house. That was the brief, was basically just a small pool house. We eventually explained this is an amazing landscape opportunity. And the wall is done in concrete, but this is from basically a hurricane code requirement. we wanted it to be in wood. And so we went through this process of finding a way to dye the concrete a mahogany color and printing it with the wood texture so it matches the oak bark. And so the building is basically hurricane proof. It's concrete, it's steel, but clad in wood and completely as close to wood as we can. The steel is allowed to weather. And the building is itself essentially a garden tent. It's just 2 concrete walls with this very thin roof in tension between. So it's essentially the simplest possible garden structure you could think of on a metaphysical level, let's say. And the space in between is going to be there's a bedroom and a small kitchen. And then this is the view from the inside of the house and at night. And then in front of the property, let's see if, doesn't play. So they had a septic tank, which a lot of us have a septic tank on our property in Miami. You can't plant anything there really more than a couple inches of soil. So this is a meadow that you would find in a pine rockland that we proposed on the septic tank. So you only have, roots going in 2 or 3 inches of soil. And it's done amazingly well, and we're super excited. Mauricio and Natalia here from NAMA, they've done an amazing job with us, and they've been really supportive to make this flower meadow, something you don't really see in Miami, come to be. And this is always changing during the year, an incredible place for butterflies and bees. So the next project is the swamp compound. It's a family compound. There's a huge Cupid family that basically bought this property and built 2 houses, and this is a swamp, and we were very inspired by that from the beginning. This is what there was a lake on the property. This is what it looked like before. Essentially overtaken by Australian pine trees, which drop their leaves. They're highly invasive, and it changes the pH of the soil so that no other native plants can grow. And so the very first thing was to remove all this and open up the property and give it a chance to restart and enter into a more ecological rhythm. And so these are the existing houses on the property. Very intimidating. We were very concerned how to fix this, but we made it here. And so this is basically a new palette of plants, largely Everglades, hardwood hammock type planting. And it's really turned into a swamp in many ways. And so this is what they call the clubhouse, a place for the family to gather. And it's just an incredible space that we love to see how the rhythm of the seasons changes it. This is a small office, and this is all original wood. We think it's either Dade County pine or cypress, but a little bit difficult to tell. And so to play off of the existing post and beam structure, we used these concrete double T's for the new houses, which are basically precast, used for parking garages. And so the entire roof of this house was built in a day. It was incredible to watch. And so you have this kind of very simple post and beam structure of the house, which allows for the house to be wide open inside. You have no columns inside, and so it really opens up the space to have views of the swamp. And this was a get-together the other day. So we saw this video just now. The Simpson Park was a huge reference for this project, and you got a lot of information on that from the video. A big thing here was using the sapling trees to have both of the tall and the low growth pattern. And this is our team here installing the garden. You can see how this was right when it was just planted, and the video, it's obviously much more of a forest now, we love that, to see how it changes. These are the interiors. And this is a roof garden we just finished very recently at the house, and all wildflowers as well. It's done great. So this is a project in Pinecrest, very, very suburban lot as well. They have these kind of oolite boulders playfully gathered around, but actually right underneath them was something much more interesting, which is the oolite right out of the ground. And so we basically took all those boulders away, stacked them on the side of the house, and this is the inspiration here was the different oolitic formations where you have the water entering. And so this is basically carved right into the ground. This is a natural pool they're going to be swimming in. And the steps, everything, it's just pure oolite. And it's just through a process of subtraction and moving the rock around the property to create this grotto. And you can see this landscape is a much more light landscape. The landscapes of Biscayne Bay were very inspirational here. And so the color palette, again, it's more of a pastel, lighter colors than the dark forest that you just saw on the previous project. And then this project is right next door to us. This was the existing condition. Again, not really that much to look at or understand, but we were very interested here in the fact that this is an artificial island, and the soil was brought here still as sand. And so there's not like great soil here. There's a ton of light, and it's right on the bay, so you get some salt spray. And so these are not conditions where you're going to be growing a lawn. These are conditions where we have out on Boca Chica in Blue Biscayne, or in the areas around Biscayne Bay. And these are the plants that you're going to see there. And so what we did here was basically bring in a sea rape forest, and the entire house, the interiors, the garden are all part of this, again, light color palette, oolite. We were very interested here the owner asked us to create a fence, and instead of making a single line hard wall, we said, let's make this fence more porous, able to be inhabited. So we carved oolite and a single piece, a single shape, and added some oolite from a nursery here as well, and created this wall, which they live in a gated community, so I think they have enough walls. So this wall, it defines a boundary, but also, it creates something new with the wall. And the whole project is about basically creating this kind of almost oceanfront or beachfront setting, this landscape that transports you to feeling like you're in a landscape in this suburb, which was the biggest challenge here. And again, here we're very interested in installing the young plants as well that are of the same species to immediately kind of kickstart the growth cycle. And now these sea grapes are starting to drop their seeds, and you get these very young sea grapes, and it's amazing to watch. And you get a couple shots of the interior too, just to understand the color palette and the different approach that this house asked for, given the ecosystem on the site. And then I'm going to pass to Andrew. He's going to go over a couple projects that the site was even more difficult, and there was an intention to create an environment rather than just react.
And give Josh a breath. As Josh said, these next few projects, not in a way to create a clear division, but in a way to further bring these projects into reality, because a huge part of what we do, it can be a very academic exercise to talk about ecology, to talk about the way that we think about it and the way that we would like it to be. But what we really strive to do, as Josh mentioned, is specifically regarding the nursery, where we're very actively, the buck stops with us. It's our project, and if we don't do it, no one's going to do it. We are very much about getting things done, and we're very active in trying to adjust people's mindset, but at the same time meet them where they are. So another parameter that a lot of these next few projects have are there are real conditions to these projects that are a lot more strict in their parameters than some of the previous projects that are a lot looser, being maybe just landscapes or landscapes with less programmatic requirements or larger expansive spaces. So the first project here is located in the South Borough, right around the corner here on Royal Palm, a vacant lot, and a vacant lot with a lot of requests. This is for a family, and so they have needs. And so we find it to be very important to be able to meet these contemporary needs of families who are owning these properties in the neighborhoods that we love, but in a way that we can still make an attempt to instill these values that we believe about the ecology of our environment and about the landscapes in general. So when we talk about that, what we're met with is oftentimes a very large building footprint. And zoning codes are not getting any more forgiving in terms of building footprints. If anything, they're getting more loose in allowing more building because development is good and it brings revenue to the city. So we want to accept these parameters, but then bring them into our current time in a way that people can start to understand what is still important to live with within these contemporary needs. So what we started to develop with this project, and this project's in permit right now in the city of Miami, it will probably enter construction next month, is to create a home of vertical gardens. When you don't have the most expansive area around you, acres and acres, really the thought is to go up and down. And so what you're seeing here is an aerial view. You can see a U-shaped courtyard house with a intimate courtyard in the middle at the ground floor. But then as we go up, the footprint of the house changes. And what that does is it allows for different ground planes at the different levels. So that as you start to divorce yourself from the first floor, where otherwise you automatically have landscape, you're still confronted with your mind is still looking out over what will be a landscape and a true environment. So here's another view where you can kind of see that development. And then again, here's at the roof of the first floor. And again, because of the shifting planes of the house and the vertical nature of the garden, it really reproduces a landscape. Again, looking the other way, and the front of the house. Once you get past the initial parameters of setting a conceptual approach, of saying, hey, we're going to create gardens everywhere, you're then confronted with all the secondary and tertiary ideas of how do you then incorporate this, because again, we're all about making these things real. So it was very important to us to have the house feel less like a singular house, because again, we're talking about a lot of square feet, a lot of home. And so to break the home up into recognizable objects as if they are also playing a role in the landscape, much like the oolitic plinths that you see in the ground here, they're objects on the scene within the landscape in terms of their reading for us. And again, looking into the other side of the front facade. Now, this next project is very similar in the sense that we're operating within very strict confines, both in terms of program and the bounds of the site. However, this is not a home, this is an office. And so we're right here on US 1 across from the Daily Bread Market. And this is our proposition. And this site has a lot of advantages, but a lot of client requests that are reasonable and important. And part of that is US 1 is very noisy. US 1 can be quite dirty. But how do you create an environment that you want to be in that echoes the Grove and echoes an environment in this type of condition? And so what we aimed to do was, again, create an architecture that can contain objects and experiences without having a strong formal appearance as a capital A architecture. The facade you're looking at here is a concrete frame with wood shutter infill. One of the really cool things about this project in particular is we will be sourcing a bit like reused dock pilings and milling the dock pilings and using that wood as the shutters, which is an extremely durable wood. And it'll be really a beautiful narrative to use something, to reuse it in this way. So once you get past that protective facade, similarly to the house we talked about a few minutes ago, is creating a vertical garden, creating different moments and environments within the project. So that, and again, similar to the conversation about landscapes versus gardens, is to make the project, regardless of its scale, feel that it is massive, to feel that it is expansive. And we have found that the way to do this is to create moments. And so you can see here on the third level, and then on the second level, you have different moments, but you're able to see through the different floors. And so you have many different opportunities for experiences. And then at the ground level, in particular, we're not in a flood zone here, but it was really important to us to emphasize that you're on the ground when we're otherwise having an elevated building. And so there's a really stark difference here to the other levels in terms of digging down. So we're actually planning on digging down, revealing some water as a retention pond, bringing in mangroves, bringing in rocks, and really emphasizing this notion of being in the landscape on the ground floor. And here's another view looking towards EOS 1, and then inside the office, and then the rooftop. This next project, they're all very different, but they all have the through line of creating an environment here. And so this project is also around the corner in Edgewater. This is the existing condition, so it's a condominium. And the request was to design townhomes. And not just townhomes, but to try to do something really special for Miami in considering what it means to have a tropical local townhome. Because in our minds and in our client's mind, the townhome is very typologically the brownstone, which if any of you are familiar, more up north, in New York, Georgetown, the connected townhomes using brick or stone, having stoops. There's a lot of typological notions that we read as townhomes, but how do we make it local? What does that look like for Miami to actually have a townhome? And so for us, again, having such strict parameters, both now in terms of the formal understanding, but again, in terms of the footprint, we found that the facade was a really important thing to engage with, and how interesting it could be to take the notion of the brownstones being monolithic, being using stone, using brick, but what's our representation of that? And of course, it's oolite. And it wasn't enough for us to just take a brownstone and copy paste and just switch out the oolite clad for cladding. So instead, what we're doing, and this is an early conceptual rendering, but again, in the vein of making things real, with our rock mason, we've structurally determined how we're going to take 4 foot tall, 3 feet by 3 feet footprint boulders essentially, and build floor at a time and slot these things in and really make it so that you will have an understanding of these things as massive stones rather than what would typically get value engineered into cladding, which is great, but it doesn't give you that sense of being with the material and understanding its massive qualities, which we think is so important. So here are some more images of the facade. And then on the interior, for any of you that are familiar with townhomes, the classic issue is you're living in a shoebox. And again, for us, the importance of doing anything in this city is to be very true to where we are. And so it was paramount for us to have a truly large, dedicated courtyard within these townhomes that brings light in all the way through. And then at the ground floor, we actually have a garden space. And then we have a rooftop as well with it's going to turn into a vegetable garden, but it's a rooftop. Some more studies of the front facade. And then this is more where we ended up, where you can start to see the boulders taking shape and really understanding how it's going to be built. So this is where it moves from a conceptual understanding to how are we really going to do this. And then the last project I'm going to talk about is interesting in its own way, different than the previous few that I've talked about. This is an existing home that stayed. And the really important conceptual understanding for this home was that little black dot you see there next to all the rectangles is a massive oak tree, and it overhangs the home. And what you're going to start to see in the next few slides is the manifestation of what we feel it means to be living under the shade of an oak tree. So this was a complete interior overhaul in terms of taking an otherwise covered and untreated and uncared for ceiling and floor space and reconsidering the quality of the wood that was already there, but highlighting it in a way where you really feel kind of like you're in a tree house, like you're really under the oak tree, you're in the shade of the oak tree. So you can see the exposed beams from inside to outside, feeling like the outside is coming in, inside is coming out. Again, doors open, low floors, low furniture, low roof, very expansive, and really this very cozy treehouse environment. And in particular, the millwork was really important to further emphasize that notion of the wood construction, the history in the Grove of shipbuilding and working with wood, and further emphasizing this environment of living under the trees. Yeah, and I think this image in particular really gives that cozy sense. We painted the floors dark. We left the ceiling exposed and natural, and it really changed the way that environment felt from before without having to manipulate the exterior. And now I'm going to hand it up to Mari to talk about some more cool things.
So I'm going to be talking about some of our recent projects, some that are kind of in early stages and some that are a little bit further along. But in particular, it's really cool to be talking about these here at the Kampong because these are all Coconut Grove cottages, which we've had the amazing opportunity to have some clients who want to keep them, restore them, and bring them, a lot of them, it's like their 100th anniversary. So bring them into their contemporary needs. And super exciting for me because I grew up in the Grove and I loved these even before I knew I wanted to be an architect. So it's really cool. So I'm excited to share them. I'll just click through some of them. They're all around the corner and all different styles. Some are wood, some are Spanish style, Key West style cottages, Spanish style again. And this is the one that is furthest along right now. And the idea here was basically to restore the existing cottage. We're maintaining a fair amount of it and adding quite a bit of square footage. And so the idea here, you can see these are some construction views. This is the character of the new addition, and this is the character of the old cottage. And so the idea was to express on the new addition the construction with these exposed concrete beams, the exposed wood rafters, which is kind of in Spanish style homes, typically everything's stuccoed over and you can't see the structure behind. So this one kind of expressed the true nature of how the original home was built. And actually through the construction process, there was kind of a lot of work that had to be done to the old house. And what's so exciting about this is that we actually had to like kind of cut really surgically and pour beams to attach the new windows to, because the concrete blocks that were around the windows weren't filled cells, and so they weren't up to code. So we had to do all this kind of like structural work to the old house. And we had this idea of like, why don't we keep exposed the new areas that we poured? So actually we're like expressing in the old house the construction method in a similar way that we did in the new house, because that was something that had to happen in order to make this home, you know, livable in today's age. And so we wanted to show people the process of what it meant, what it took to keep this house. And so you can see the new, this is looking through what's going to be the living room. This was before the roof went in, but looking through the front door to the new addition. That was it when the roof came off. That's me. And you can kind of see here, but the, huh?
And there's me.
Where are you?
Pointing at something.
Oh, Andrew's in the front door. But you can kind of see the pitch of the roof of the new addition there on the right, and then the old building on the left. And so these two roofs kind of echo each other. And so the new and old formally have this kind of interesting relationship. Some more construction process. And on the second floor, we have this exposed wood ceiling. The raft on the right side, actually, this is before the windows are in. You're standing like right where the window is, and on the right side is the porch, and on the left side is the master bathroom. So you can see the continuity of this structure directly from inside to outside, which, you know, you saw in a lot of older houses, particularly in the Grove, a lot of these cottages before air conditioning. And so after that, there's a lot of coordination that has to happen in order to make this possible, and really specific places where the AC is coming and going to in order to expose certain areas. So it's really cool to have that kind of condition again, with all the luxuries of contemporary life. From the porch. Yeah, so here I think you can kind of see the way the two roofs relate to each other, the old house and the new house, and you can see the concrete that we had to pour in order to accommodate the roof, in order to accommodate the windows, which is being exposed, which, you know, it's not typical of a Spanish style house, so that's usually stuccoed over, but in this case we stuccoed panels in between the concrete. And, you know, a big thing here was not only maintaining the character of the street and having, you know, the neighborhood be able to maintain its traditional kind of character at the street level, but also having an addition, which is it's a large addition, but the idea was to kind of break it up into smaller cottage size bits rather than having one large architectural expression, kind of in the nature Andrew was talking about some of the other projects. And so, you know, you don't really get a point of view where you see the entire addition. You see these smaller, almost like an accumulation of houses, and everything in the house really is at the scale of the old cottage in terms of the room sizes and things like that. So you can see what I'm talking about there. It's at the scale of the older house, which also has this like courtyard garden that runs through it. And then this one is really cool. We're working on the architecture, the interiors, and the landscape of this project. And this was one where the interiors really started to take shape with the three of us working on it, and started to inform the architecture and the landscape in a large way because of the character and design of the interior. So the original idea was we got a branch from the oak tree that's in front, we were like visiting the site and we found a branch that had a piece of lichen. It's like those like green little kind of amoeba. They look like brains on trees. They're green and blue and yellow, and it had this beautiful color, which kind of was similar to the concrete color and some of the lighter woods we were using. And we thought to kind of use that as an eyedropper to inform all of the interiors inside. And so really we used, I mean, the main kind of thing too is really to not use white, but to use a white which has just a hint of green, so that you have, you know, this feeling of the landscape coming inside, and really literally taking the type of nature and color palette that we found on site and just applying it to the interiors. So that's the living room and the sunken living room on the left of the new addition, exposing all of the structure as well on the interior, creates this kind of grid in which we have these panels in a really similar way to the exterior. And then this is in the old cottage, and so here we're using kind of the motif of the facade to create some like molding details and some organizing factors, but really trying to you know, go to the, I think that a lot of these old homes are so precious because they don't let anything be default. Every single thing is a design opportunity to do something interesting and to do something unique, where you go into these old houses and you're like, gosh, look at that niche. Like, that's just the coolest wall niche. And so wanting to make sure that we don't ignore that level of detail. So that's been something we've been really excited to be working on. Another cottage that we're starting, this one had a very different kind of architectural expression, but the idea here is basically we cast the zoning envelope in concrete and then leave the old cottage there as this kind of jewel box inside, and really emphasizing that there might be this big addition, but the important thing to be looking at is really the old cottage, and that's what we're looking at, and that's what we want you to look at. And then the interior has a structure. This is a wood cottage that has exposed rafters, and so using that same construction for the interior. So then you come inside and you see that you kind of have this continuation of the old logic. A new project also close by, Central Grove. This one had this is kind of an early conceptual rendering of the project, but the idea here is basically we took the old house and flipped it inside out. So in this rendering, you've just walked inside and you see a fireplace, but you're in a garden rather than in the living room. So what we did was basically hollow out the old house and then create a courtyard around it. So you're kind of left with this ruin of the old cottage, which you still experience, but in a different way, so that we can accommodate the needs of the just needing more space and needing a different layout. So you experience the old house in every room of this house, and every point of view is always focused on this, and the fireplace being this kind of like indication that, you know, I'm in a garden, but I'm actually inside, but I'm outside, and having that kind of like interesting play between the two. This is my house. We're kind of thinking about how to, I started getting jealous, and so I wanted my own. But we're thinking about, this is a 1946 Key West style cottage. Why are you laughing at me? This is a 1946 Key West style cottage, and what's interesting about our house, which I love, is that it's actually a concrete house, and it has this like exoskeleton, which is like in wood. All the details are in wood. The porch, classic old Florida kind of typology, and so it's almost like it has two layers to it, with two different materials. So we're trying to think about how to add on to this house. And so our initial idea was to create like a table so you don't touch the old house, and then use this like motif of the exoskeleton and the wood detail to kind of be like this blurry edge of the outside of the house. Another cottage, and this one, the idea was to create a veil around it. And so the cottage inside is like a jewel inside of a jewel box. It's kind of hidden, and you can experience it from the outside inside of this new structure.
Thank you.
Yeah.